All right, Matt. Hope that works for you. Okay, I believe we got a couple piled up. I believe this will end up being episode 21.
Very good.
Episode 20, which is going to come out. It's Monday, the 26th right now.
Yep.
The 28th, our favorite episode is coming out, so in 2 days. So by the time you hear this, you will have listened to our favorite episode.
I'm going to say one of the greatest things.
I was about to say we're not going to tell you who it is, but actually
they'll know.
They're going to know by the time they hear this. So with Rooster and Billy Jack, great episode. I have a little bit of concern for listeners that they're not going to, some of the stuff's going to not go over your head, but they cover some things so fast that are actually pretty unbelievable. So I've talked with you. I think that we need to we probably have a couple hours of breaking that episode down and providing context, providing background to a lot of those stories, because when you actually understand, I mean, they're just laughing and going, oh yeah, I remember this and blah, blah, blah. But if you start to actually understand the context of some of those stories, it becomes almost not believable stories.
Right. Bill just kept going. And then there's each time he'd start a story, he came ready to roll. It was,
and then we finished recording and went downstairs, and they sat for another 20 minutes telling more stories.
Yeah.
We thought we were out of it.
I know.
And then get down, they immediately start thinking of more. And then Bill's wife wanted a copy of that recording on a little USB stick. And so once we got the show edited, I called and got their mailing address to send it down to her. And Bill on the phone, Billy Jack, Willie, heard him called Willie.
Yeah.
On the phone, he took another 20 minutes on the phone telling me stories. So we definitely will do another one of those.
Yeah.
But look, coming up shortly, we will do a couple, probably I would imagine we could do 2 episodes of talking about that episode.
Right.
So I hope you guys all enjoyed that as much as we did. It was
just a pleasure.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, it was good.
So we won't talk too much about it now, because we will talk more about it when we behind the scenes it. Is that what we'll call it? We'll do it behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yep. I think so.
I got a certified letter this week that I don't think, did I tell you about this certified letter I got from Montana Department of Transportation?
No.
MDOT?
No, but I also got a certified letter from the MDOT this week.
Oh yeah.
We're going to hear yours. Mine's small and inconsequential. It was the results of my audit. Remember my audit?
Oh yeah.
Like weeks ago?
Good?
Yeah. Good enough.
Oh.
So.
Well, this wasn't due to an audit. If any of you have driven around any small towns in Montana, when you drive into any town, almost without exception, you're going to encounter a sign on the side of the road as you enter the town that says, welcome to whatever town. It's usually going to have, like, for instance, where I live, Fairfield, the high school is the Eagles, the mascot. It says Fairfield Eagles, state Class B champions. And then it will have each sport that the school has ever won a state championship in.
Yeah.
Any town in Montana you drive through, any little town has these.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you notice this in other states?
I do. I was just going to say in Nebraska and South Dakota, it's the same thing. At some point, there's a sign on the side of the road in somebody's pasture, or somewhere as you're coming into town. Welcome to Thedford, Nebraska.
State champions, whatever year, in girls basketball, boys basketball, track, football, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, Fairfield has one of those, and the sign for Fairfield happens to be in the corner of our pasture.
Okay. Okay. Right.
All right. So I get this. In fact, I got the letter right here.
Oh, with the picture on it.
In the picture.
Well, what's the letter about?
The letter actually has a picture of the sign, and it says, subject 60-day notice, unlawful outdoor advertising.
Oh, wow.
So this letter has about 4 paragraphs of all the illegality of that sign.
So dangerous.
And let me say, I have nothing to do with this sign.
It's been here for years.
It's in the corner of the pasture. The current sign replaced one that had been there even longer. It's been there forever.
Part of the town.
Been there forever. And so then as you get through all the codes and the acts and all permit violation notices that are being violated, it gets to the point where it says, during my route survey, I could not locate the permit on the sign. So someone from the state is doing a route survey.
No way.
And saw this sign and took the time to see if there was a permit on it and said he could not locate it.
Looked high and low. Searched all over.
And then it says, this letter is your notice of the department's intention to remove the sign. You have 60 days from receipt of this notice to get the permit, remove the sign, or make a request to have a hearing before the Montana Transportation Commission to show why the sign should not be removed. It says you can mail this request to the guy's name who did it, who did the survey. So
that's his official position with the state. It must be one of his varying responsibilities.
Oh, actually, he has his title here: Outdoor Advertising Control Right-of-Way Agent.
Agent.
So my first thought was to send him an email back telling him all my thoughts of, this is what my taxpayer money is having some dude out driving the roads looking at every small sign in small towns. Anyway,
advertising. It says it's an advertising thing. That's a stretch, you know.
Well, which all codes are written to be able to be stretched. Did I ever tell you about that? What's the title of this book? It's like 3 felonies a day or 4 felonies a day. But anyway, the average American commits like 3 or 4 felonies a day.
Really?
Because the laws are written so broadly that just living your life as a normal human,
you pretty much
they can adjust the law. I think there's I think it actually might have been someone from the Soviet Union had a line that said, "Show me the man and I'll show you the crime."
Oh, really?
I guess someone showed him me and out in the field. Anyway, I emailed him back and told him I have no interest in getting a permit on this sign, so don't take 60 days. Come get it now.
That's what you said.
So come take it down now. I'm not going to get a permit for it. And then I proceeded to give him an extremely detailed and long list of everything that they have to watch out for and fix and address in the pasture.
Oh, to get in to remove
it.
Nice. That's a good thing.
Because of livestock and children and whatnot. They can't leave big concrete blocks, holes, fence. And I said I've taken a good amount of photographic and video footage of the area. So if there is any dispute of damages you may cause, we can go back to video. And I also encourage them to take video themselves. And then when it comes to small town teams, this is the kind of stuff that will fire people up.
Right. Like people lose their minds around town.
I told him, I said, I have no idea who put the sign up. I don't know who maintains it. Because if there's a new state title, it goes on the sign. I don't know who does any of this. So I told him that I will send a copy of this letter to all the local newspapers, and I'll make sure his contact information is in it. So if there's anyone local that knows whose sign it is, or actually who wants to take possession of the sign after they take it down,
right? Because somebody's got to.
They can contact him.
Yeah. Did you get a response yet?
And then the last thing I wrote, I said, man, there are some long, lonely roads out in Montana. Driving from town to town, making sure state championship signs are in compliance with this permitting. I said, someone's got to do that job. Stay safe out there. Then I turned the whole thing over to the local newspaper. Our local newspaper, he gets pretty fired up at things that he thinks is government overreach. I have since gone on to find out that that was an Eagle Scout project that someone replaced the old sign with this one. And they had to come up with a few $100s for permitting to put the sign up.
So somebody somewhere,
someone's got it. But that's
Was felonious mean like a felony thing that you're doing? Someone's
Sounds
doing
like
a
it.
felony-ridden eagle project.
Oh man.
Good for you, though. Good for you, because like this letter makes it seem like, oh man, you know. But as you talk about it and the way that you word it in your response, you're like, you know, like if I was the guy and I was reading your email, I'd be questioning, do we need to be doing this? Is this really? Because if they're doing it here, you know, they got to be doing it all over the state.
Come and get it, dude. Come and get it.
Good. I love that you have such a good way of being able to do these things like this.
Someone I showed it to looked up the guy and found him on Facebook. He's a mid-20s kid doing duck lips in his selfie.
Oh.
From guess what state?
Cali?
Who do Montanans blame all of our problems on?
California. It's from California. Oh. You know there's people from California listening right now shaking their head. Why did you send us this guy? You should have kept him. But they really couldn't have picked
so anyone
person.
not from Montana listening to this, I don't remember a period in my life where not every problem Montana has is not blamed on Californians moving into the state. It's Californians moving in. So I say that jokingly because that is a I think people think it is completely serious, but it's just very comical to me because there's nothing that's happened in the state that people don't like that is not blamed on Californians.
Right. Literally.
But anyway, so that that was midweek. Thinking of anything else that went on.
Do you want me to follow up with my little?
Yeah, let's hear how your audit went.
So yeah, I first of all I got an email just out of the blue that says, "Here's your audit results for your trucking company."
Let me interject. If anyone who has not listened to all the episodes or has missed episodes here or there, Jackson gave out some handy advice for anyone that's owner operators. He was requested in an audit to provide 5 years of fuel receipts.
It was 4 or 5. I've forgotten now in the details, but yeah, literally the receipts. They said we need your fuel receipts from December of 2019, and as I mentioned in a previous episode, I came up with like everything. Like I got everything they asked for. I somehow magically had it all, except for 1 month in the period that they requested, and I couldn't come up with it. It was a short month. I didn't do a lot of trucking, but it was like 4 receipts I was missing out of that month. And I said, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know. How much is it per offense? I don't know. Well, the results came down. I get an email, an official email first from the state saying, here's your results. And I open up the email and they had mistakenly sent me the official confidential results of somebody else's audit from some other trucking company. And it was interesting because this just goes to show you how silly some of these things can be. It was an audit for a Ford dealership somewhere, I can't remember where in the state, far western Montana, little tiny family-owned Ford dealership that maybe goes out of state, maybe goes to Spokane, a few miles over the border for them to pick up some used cars. And that Ford dealership did pass with flying colors, their audit. So I informed them, about mine, and they said, oh, sorry. So my results come down. I get a phone call from the gal that did the audit, and she says, we need to schedule a phone call. And I'm like, oh, well, the Ford company just got an email. We need to have a phone call. And I'm like,
that can't be good.
Right.
Can't be good.
So I'm like, all right. I'm trying to play it cool. Like, yeah, no, love it. How's tomorrow afternoon? So the phone call comes, and she's like, okay, we went through the results, and we found something. And I'm like, okay, what'd you find? Well, back in 2020, you were going through the state of Missouri, and you neglected to produce the receipt. You wrote it on your report and the receipt number and everything, but the physical receipt was not there. So you owe you're in violation, and you owe the state of Missouri for a non-payment of, a portion of their fuel taxes, which isn't exactly true because I did buy fuel there. So I did pay road taxes for that tank of fuel. I just didn't have the proof that I did it, right? So I still don't know what to expect. So I'm like, well, okay, what are we talking? She goes, well, after the penalties and the late fee and the interest that's accrued since 2020, I'm like, come on. She goes, you owe $11.59. It's just like, oh, jeez. That's what it was. And then she proceeds to, so I'm like, well, what do I do? And she goes, well, for things that are that cheap, sometimes we actually don't collect them. I'm like, okay, but I don't want this to be on my thing. So, like, it's $11. What? Well, we'll send you an official invoice when we email you all your stuff back. So the other day I got an official invoice from the state of Montana to pay the $11. You cannot pay it any other way than credit card over the phone. So you actually have to call a human and run your card over the phone with the human from the state. Possibly your guy's other job, he probably does signs and does the collection phone calls for the IFTA audits. But I paid it off, paid my $11, and that was it. And here was the funny part. When I was talking to her on the phone, I was like, so was there anything you saw? Do I need to do something better? My records, is anything you don't like? And for you trucking folks out there, she goes, I don't keep individual trip mileages. I just keep monthly miles. So here's all the states I went through. Here's all the miles. I don't say this was, Montana to Sioux Falls. This was Montana to Grand Island. This was Montana. I just do it all. And she goes, it'd really be nice for us on our end when we audit if we knew each individual trip. That way we don't kind of have to guess where you were going on the roads that you took. And I'm like, okay, is that like a requirement? She's like, no, it's just it'd be nice.
It's easier for us. Harder for you, easier for us.
Yes. And I said, no requirement? Well, no. Because when I got my official, you're done, here's all your stuff back, congratulations, go on with your life, no mention of this. So I was like, yeah.
If the Montana Department of Transportation has enough man hours to send someone out to every little town in Montana to measure the signs from the center of the road to where the sign is, advertising state championships, they, I think, clearly have the time to figure out the miles,
decipher my trips.
Yeah,
right. So we're all clear, but I never did dig into what would happen. On a serious note to you guys, what would happen if you didn't? They never said a word about the 4 receipts that I couldn't produce. I don't know if they just said, well, don't worry about that month.
Let me ask you this. So you had written down all the data.
Right.
You just didn't have the actual receipt to match the data.
Probably fell on the floor, blew away or something.
The missing receipts, you didn't write down anything about those either?
I had nothing. Well, they're on my envelope, so they were written down, but I didn't have the physical receipts.
But isn't that what happened in Missouri? You had written it down, but not
the
receipts. So my suggestion is when you don't have the receipt, go back to your other data and put a big black line through it.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
It seems odd.
Yeah. I didn't go through to match. I was just like, here's the month. Looks like there's a bunch of receipts in that envelope.
Now, someone listening who understands this may answer this question for me if you can't. You wrote down that you had done this in Missouri.
Kingdom City, Missouri.
So you had it all written down.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was written down, you're saying you did it. Correct.
Right.
But the receipt didn't prove that you did it.
Right.
So what are they, what is the...
They wouldn't have known if I had crossed it out. Correct.
But I guess what I'm saying is, what's the worst thing that could have happened? I don't understand. Let me think of how to phrase this correctly.
Uh-huh.
You're saying you did it. You're not trying to hide that you did it.
No.
So you're saying, they're saying you said you did it, but you don't have proof that you did it.
Right.
So we're gonna make you pay for something that you already said that you did, Not we're gonna make you pay for something we found that you did that you didn't say you did.
You can't prove you did. Right. To the tune of $11 with interest.
But I guess I don't know. I'm not making myself clear. It seems to me if you tried to hide it all, that's when they'd be like, "Yeah,
you hid this. Here's your penalty."
But you didn't hide it. It's right there saying I did it.
Right.
I guess the receipt proves that you did it.
It's one of those things that you're like, well, I mean, and it's pretty inconsequential because of the fineage.
I need to think of how to phrase that better. I'm trying to think of I don't know. Maybe we should just edit the last 2 minutes of me rambling off. Anyway,
no, it's one of those weird things. And then for the other thing to be completely, they didn't even respond because I asked them before I sent the stuff in. I said, hey, because they're always like, any questions, just reach out. So I reach out. Hey, I'm reaching out. It's one of my least favorite terms, by the way. Hey, reach out to so-and-so. I reached out. So I did that and never got a peep back. Like, can I give you a different month or not a word? So I don't know. I just sent it all in.
$11.
$11.
Speaking of like very phrases you really dislike, reaching out is one that you really dislike.
Right.
That one's never hit my radar.
Really?
But now I'm going to be very self-conscious if I ever write it.
You can be like, Jackson doesn't like that.
I will tell you the thing that it doesn't make my blood boil, but it makes my head want to explode.
Now I'm wondering if I say it.
Have you ever been in a situation where someone's talking about the livestock trucking industry who's not in it, and you're like, well, as a livestock truck driver, like when people say, well, as a fill in the blank, whatever you are,
like as a dentist, I would.
Well, as a dentist, I would suggest this, or when people say that, I'm like, jeez, come on, dude.
Like it's not it's just I'm asking you as a person, as a human, just And
you see it all the time in like news reports or well, as a fill in the blank, I think this. And I understand you're trying to say, okay, my background is in this, so I maybe have some legitimacy. But when you say as a fill in the blank,
and that's the catch with saying as a trucker, because any kind of trucker, you're immediately going to lose credibility. So we shy away from it because if you're like, as a cow trucker, they'll be like, what? No. No.
Now, if you say, I've had a few years driving truck and hauling cows, and my experience has been this. That's totally different to me.
Deal.
Like I'm good to go. But when you say as a, like
the foremost expert in the dental world, I would say.
So the last week has been chilly
for everyone.
Chilly,
like everywhere.
So my favorite story that's come out of this last week with the cold here, and we got with the wind chill, I think the coldest that we were at, we had 2 days in a row, which were about 50 below
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were same in Lewistown.
So, chilly. This last Monday.
Wait. Okay, I need to explain wind chill too, because it's an interesting concept.
Go ahead and explain it.
Do you want me to do it now?
Yeah.
So, wind chill. Okay, when we say wind chill,
will you qualify it with
as a livestock hauler with a lot of experience in wind chill and the effect on a living being? I'm going to tell you that wind chill is a gnarly thing. Okay, so most of you are going to know this, but I want to take it a step further than what you think of, because I'm going to share some stories from my week, and wind chill is going to play a huge factor into this. Okay, so I want you to understand this before we go on. Wind chill is, say it's 20 degrees below zero, and the wind is dead calm. There's not a breath of wind. You go outside, it feels on your skin like 20 degrees below zero. If you go outside and it's 20 below zero and the wind's blowing 40 miles per hour, which it did here almost nonstop for days, you go outside and on your skin, even though it's only actually 20 below, nothing outside is any colder. If you took a heat gun and measured the temperature, the inanimate objects, a piece of steel sitting out in your driveway is going to be 20 below zero. But with the wind blowing on your human skin that is holding heat inside of it, it's going to feel like 50 below zero. There's a chart that tells you. Same thing with humidity in the summer, right? it's 80 degrees, but when it's like crazy humid, it feels like it's 100 and something degrees out. It feels hotter to you. So wind chill, this becomes a topic of discussion for people with equipment. Like, does wind chill affect equipment? And the answer is yes, it does. You've seen like pickups or semis driving down the road and they put a big old piece of cardboard in front of their radiator. They're doing that because as the nasty cold wind, the 20 below zero air comes in to the front of your rig, it removes heat really fast from your radiator. Like, it pulls the heat away and dissipates it to the point where your engine won't stay warm enough to even keep you warm in the cab. Like, your heater will quit working. So you put a windbreak to stop that wind chill from hitting your radiator and pulling heat away. That's what wind does. That's what moving air does in the cold. It removes heat. So anything that has heat, it'll remove it until it hits the temperature that is, whatever the thermometer says. Make sense? You dig that?
Did my shop teacher in high school always said wind chill didn't affect equipment?
It won't make metal any colder than the actual temperature.
So what I understand,
but it removes heat.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to.
So I guess, like with a living creature, we will create a layer of warm air around us, and within the skin, whatever.
Right.
With the air blowing that away, I mean, think about, you could be on a nice summer day. T-shirt's fine. You jump on a motorcycle and go for a drive with just shorts and a T-shirt on. You can get chilled up because the wind blowing,
removing the heat.
Right. Just a vehicle running though doesn't rely on heat like a living creature. So wind chill wouldn't affect it in that situation. Would you agree or disagree?
I used to think wind chill does not affect equipment. I've changed my mind. It does in all ways. It removes heat from your vehicle, from your equipment. Your transmission, it removes heat from your transmission to the point where your truck always is kind of shifting hard because the oil can't get hot enough. So if the wind would quit blowing, your transmission will start catching up and it'll get warm, and all of a sudden your shifter starts working a little easier. So it does. I have to say that it does affect equipment. And there'll be probably people that comment and are like, no. But it does.
Well, can they say as a
if
they want to argue with you, think it's not true? Can they say as a fill in the blank?
And I've got something I'm going to share later that's a really interesting. This really illustrated it to me, how wind chill can affect your fuel.
So this last Monday was kind of when things started rolling in. My dental assistant, who I work with the most, had previously been 2 weeks in the Bahamas. So she got back
from that into this.
She got back on Sunday, and then Monday, that's what she came back into. So she had a couple things going for her. She had been in a tropical climate, so she, living on a sailboat on a beach for 2 weeks. So her body was a little bit climatized to something warmer. I'm going to say she probably had a good time. So there's a little bit of detoxing going on. She got back. So when she came into the office Monday morning, she was hunched over almost completely in half and wrapped in her coat so tight I almost couldn't see her. She looked miserable. She just said, I'm so cold.
So
like
cold.
She was dying. She was so cold. And I thought, oh yeah, it's colder than the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And it was still dark out, and as it got light, I was looking out the window and I saw her car parked out there. I said, hey, is your window supposed to be down? And she's like, no, it's not down. I said, your passenger's driver's side window's down. She's like, what? And so she looks, and sure enough, it was. She had driven about 30 miles.
Oh.
With that brutal cold with her window down.
How do you do that?
I think she was so discombobulated,
just so out of her sorts,
just detoxing, just really cold, just so out of it that she didn't realize that back passenger window's down. So her normal cold atmosphere that she was coming back to, She added a very strong wind chill
She
to
was
it.
really rolling with it. Oh, yeah. Ask her about wind chill.
Oh man. So that was kind of my start to the cold week. We survived it fine.
Well, your livestock water held up.
Livestock waters did great. I put in. I always want to say Corbett, but I think it's Cobet.
Oh, the brand of waters you're talking
I'm
about?
looking this up real quick.
That's the biggest challenge when it gets cold. Livestock water. Their feed intake, what do they say? It doubles just about?
Sure can.
They will eat so much more hay to stay warm, and then the other catch is trying to keep waters thawed out.
Okay, so I put in this last year. I put in 6 of these Cobet, Cobett. They call them frost-free waters. They don't claim to not have the water freeze, but they say it'll protect all your pipes and everything inside, which is the nightmare when that stuff freezes.
Right. Yeah.
If you have ice on top,
Easy.
break that off. So when we were down real cold, I did get a little bit of ice on top, but no problems. Just a quick tap with the heel of my foot, and
Pipes didn't freeze though, huh?
no. And even on those coldest nights, if they were drinking, I would come out 24 hours essentially after breaking ice once, and it was I'm gonna call it a little bit of slush. It hadn't frozen completely. So if they were drinking, it was staying free.
Keeping it. That's impressive.
So can't complain.
That's impressive.
Everything made it through. Tractors ran fine.
Diesel didn't gel.
No diesel gel. Plugged the tractors in. They all fired right up. No problems. No gel diesel. So we did good.
That's good because that's cold, man.
It's cold. Anyway,
Oh,
so I had the fun stuff, laughing at someone else's cold. Let's hear. Maybe I can laugh at your.
You'll be
your
laughing.
experiences.
It just I went through like such a roller coaster of like I've got this, I've got the perfect plan. This week was basically a lesson in. Some of you guys before had the plan where you've got everything plotted out, you have your schedule down, you know if I can just get along, if I don't have any breakdowns, I don't have any issues, I'm gonna be out, I'll be back. There's just no reason for anyone really to be out when it's 20 to 25 below zero and the wind is blowing as hard as it did, which for me was the surprise of the whole week, was the wind. I've driven through a lot.
I thought you were going to say the surprise was that you were out.
That I was out in. So let me just start from the beginning of my week. So this is our last, leading up to Christmas, it's our last week of hauling cattle basically, because the bulk of what we haul this time of year is sale barn work, where I've got a customer in Nebraska that buys cattle out of all the auction yards in Montana, and the auction yards typically have their last sale early in Christmas week. So did a little coordinating with my guys down there. And initially our real cold was supposed to come in Tuesday night. Monday was going to be and dip down cold, but not like this, at least where we're at. You guys were a day ahead of us, I think. But in Lewistown, it was, decent. If you just get home by Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, you're going to be okay. It's just that first night. So we have this plan. They have a load. I'm supposed to pick up from 2 different sale barns out in the far western Montana, out of Butte, and then work my way over to the east and pick up in Three Forks, which is near Bozeman, Montana, and pick up those 2 bunches, make my way down to Grand Island, and unload and boogie on out.
Where's Grand Island?
Grand Island is kind of south central, a little bit east of central Nebraska, if you're wondering, right along I-80. So let me think. So I get all set up and I'm all planned to load Monday night. I'd been doing some previous trucking. I get back into the state. I'm just on my way to go load this deal. And my buyer from Nebraska calls and he goes, "Hey, where are you at?" Which is usually not a good thing. So I say, I'm, a couple hours away from Butte where I'm going to load tonight because of this weather. Oh, and he goes, shoot. He goes, "I didn't think you were going to load till Tuesday morning." And so I had a truck come up free, and I thought I could kind of move things forward. And I sent a truck to load your load, and I was going to shift you to another town to have you load a little later on. And I'm like, no. We have this death bomb coming. I was like, you got to get a hold of this truck and shut him off. Because, I don't like to put my foot down, but I was like, if I don't get this load out tonight, I'm out. I'm going home. So he, if I could load Monday night, I could unload in Nebraska Tuesday morning, mid-morning, unload, turn around, and hammer back home, be home Wednesday morning. That's my plan. Well, he gets the truck shut off, kind of. Finally gets a hold of this other truck, and he ended up taking half my load. I took the far west cattle. He took the Bozeman cattle. So to fill up and be done, I had to make a second pick in Billings. So this seems like it shouldn't matter. So why does it matter if you have to pick in Bozeman or Billings? Like, what's the big deal? Well, by the time I load in Bozeman, by the time I load in Butte and I get all the way to Billings, it's about 2 a.m. And Billings had just had a big sale, their big last sale of the year. So I roll in, and there's like 3 or 4 trucks waiting to load. Bozeman has no trucks waiting to load. It's a tiny little sale barn. Mm-hmm. They had their sale a few days before that. There's nothing waiting for me to keep me from loading Bozeman. Billings, different story. So I have to sit from 2 a.m. until about 7 a.m. until I can load. So, of course, I'm like, well, I'll take a nap, I guess, get a little sleep while I can. Well, when I wake up from my nap, there's 2 new trucks that got ahead of me. So I'm like, okay, well. And right now the weather's fine in Billings. It's not like it's nasty or nothing. Well, I get loaded. I get out of Billings at about 9 a.m., 8 a.m. time I get loaded and finally pulled away and on my way. Whereas if I had been able to load in Butte and Bozeman, by 9 a.m. I'd have been halfway across South Dakota. But I lost all that time in Billings. So now I'm like, not good. Because I'm looking at the weather and all this death bomb starting to develop. And they're actually now saying it's going to be worse than we predicted. It's going to be colder. Now there's going to be all these winds blowing, which we weren't expecting. So I get down, I get unloaded. It's late Tuesday night. It's midnight Tuesday. Previously, by midnight Tuesday, I thought I was going to be back into Montana 6 hours from pushing home. Well, now I'm to Nebraska and I'm shot because I haven't hardly slept, for 2 days now. So I get unloaded and I'm like, should I just try to wander my way up, just dead on my feet? Well, it was 7 degrees in Nebraska, which is warm enough for me to shut my truck off. I hate sleeping when my truck's running. It drives me nuts. So I'm like, I'm going to shut my truck off. I'm going to get a good sleep. I'm going to get up early, and I'm going to just at least have some energy to take on the day. And I'm really glad that I did, because that day turned into the most intense, stressful horror show that I've ever had in my entire career trucking. And it really surprised me, because normally we talk about like bad roads, right? Like it's slick and you're worried about sliding off the road. Those were not the issues. Roads were beautiful, like just bare. There's some snow blowing across, but it was 15 below zero. So the roads aren't going to get slick. They're fine. So I wake up in Grand Island now, you guys. It's Wednesday morning, and I'm like, if I push hard, I can get all the way home today. It's going to get sketchy because I see all this stuff coming down through the Black Hills of South Dakota, emergency travel only. But I've been through a lot of that stuff. I mean, it's what we do. It's every winter in Montana. So I get up, I get into South Dakota, and I'm going to interject here another little memory for you guys that are listening, because I would guess that about half of you have seen this video on Instagram this week. It's a video, and I'm going to talk about this a little later. It's this video of this guy that's parked in the truck stop. He looks out his passenger window and it's completely drifted over. It's totally drifted. He goes out his driver's side and shoots a video, and his whole truck's buried in a drift in the truck stop parking lot, along with a couple trucks next to him. And that was in Vivian, South Dakota. So I get up to Vivian, South Dakota, where that video was shot. It's all right. Everything's good. Visibility has gotten really bad at this point. So I'm working my way. My plan is to go westbound across I-90 through South Dakota. And then I'm going to jump off at basically just past Sturgis. I'm going to jump on Highway 212, come into Montana. I'm going to stay south and come up through Billings, shoot home. Well, I get to Vivian. Things are, decent, but starting to fall apart weather-wise. I get on the freeway at Vivian, and it's just a full-on ground blizzard, South Dakota ground blizzard. So I start checking the weather stations because these apps they have now, these websites, they're very informative. Like they have cameras, and each camera has an actual wind speed thing on it, so you can see the live wind speeds. Well, it's 25 sustained, 35 mile an hour gusts, which is enough to blow a wall of snow about, 40 or 50 feet high from north to south, just to where you can go about 30, 35 miles an hour. So I'm picking my way very much on edge. At this point, you're not listening to music. You're just honed in. And I'm 9 hours from home. And I start going, and I look across the freeway, and every so often you see a truck come. Well, I just noticed, there hasn't been any traffic on the other side of the freeway, which is something a lot of motorists might not even think of. But if you ever see the traffic vanish on the opposite side of the freeway, you better start doing some investigating because it's for a reason. So the reason, of course, was they shut the freeway off about 40 miles ahead of me. They'd closed it off at Wall, South Dakota. And it's Christmas week, right? This is rolling into Christmas.
So let's stop right there for a second and talk about ground blizzards.
Mm.
If you've never been in an intense ground blizzard, it's terrifying because you can't see anything.
Mm-hmm. The air in front of you is the same color and complexion as the sky and the clouds. It all just becomes just this winterscape of nothing in front of you. You just can't.
I would say I've been in some really dense fog driving, and I think a ground blizzard, an intense ground blizzard, is worse than intense fog.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it leads to another thing. It leads to the fog-like visibility. It also leads to finger drifts. Remember Rooster and Billy Jack talking about that road closure? Dad kept busting the finger drifts, and Bill was just following along. You start getting those.
And usually ground blizzards, it's when you got wind, and so it's just blowing everything basically at ground level. So instead of you might think a blizzard, the snow coming from the sky really heavy.
Right.
It feels more like the blizzard's coming from left to right or right to left.
Yeah.
Instead of up and down, it's straight across.
Exactly. And you may have seen, did you see any of the pictures of the underpasses in the Dakotas that were just totally buried? That's what ground blizzards do. They fill up the underpasses, clear up to the road that goes over the freeway. They fill it completely up with snow, and they have to punch their way through and dig them out. That's ground blizzards.
So that's why the freeway had been closed that Jackson has found himself on.
Yeah. So I jump on and I'm like, I am not spending 4 days, because I'm looking at the weather. There's no reprieve. This is Wednesday morning. It says that it's supposed to let up Friday afternoon. And I'm like, this is not happening to me. And it's Christmas week, and family's in town, and this desire to finish the season. This is the last load before Christmas. So I jump on my map, and I see that if I cut north up through Phillips, South Dakota, I can jump on Highway 34, which leads you. It's a 2-lane that just parallels the freeway and leads you into Sturgis. I'm like, I am a smart man. Look at this. So I jump off, and going north, I'm like, hey, these roads aren't that bad. I mean, roads were always good, but the visibility got better because now I'm going straight into the wind, and it feels a little more like a conventional blizzard, not the kind that makes you dizzy and sick. And so I roll up. I get up to Highway 34, and same thing. There's not a lot of traffic on that highway, but I never did pass anybody. So I pull up my app again 30 minutes later, after I've got off the freeway. And guess what else is closed? Highway 34. They shut her down. They're just like, it's whatever the reasons are, it's too silly to maintain. It's getting too crazy out here, so we're shutting it down. So now I've left the comfort of at least the freeway has a lot of services. And this is the first moment where I was like, I may have made a mistake. And I like to feel like I'm pretty blameless in what my decisions I make are like, no, they're the right ones always. when it comes to trucking, but I started to go, if I get stuck out, like there's nothing out here. There's a couple little towns that maybe dried up in the 70s and 80s. Like they're not. They're just a name on the road. There's actually no town. So now I've got to decide. And you guys got to understand, the whole while, it's now, 15, 18 below zero. And the winds have picked up to a 35 mile an hour sustained, 40 mile an hour gusts. And it's just so cold that if you do encounter an issue, you're in a remote spot. Now, you've taken yourself away from the flow of people and humans to where you're going to get cold really fast. If your truck shuts off, the inside of your truck, the wind chill is going to suck all the heat out of your truck in just a very short amount of time. So now I'm left with these options. Do I turn around and go back to the freeway that I know is closed, accept my fate, go back and find a truck stop, and just park there and just say, forget it, just forget it. But this overwhelming desire to be home took over and led me to go, there's one more 2-lane that goes north yet, up to a little cow town called Faith, ironically. I was like, if I can just make it to Faith, then I can hit Highway 212, which is another highway that parallels the freeway even further north. All these roads go east to west across South Dakota. So I make the turn, kicking her up north, 30 miles up to Faith. So I get up to Faith and I make it pretty decent. It's gotten colder now and the sun's just about to go down, but I'm feeling pretty good. Like I made the right decision. And this is where things took a turn from feeling good to hopeless. I don't get scared on the road anymore. Like I've kind of been there. You've done this. You've loaded all the crazy cattle. You've broke down. You've had major breakdowns that disable you right in the road. All this stuff. You usually don't get scared, but this was the stretch where I actually had a moment where I was scared. And it feels stupid even saying that, but like I feared as I was sitting there. So I hit Faith. Now, my plan was if I can get from Faith over to Belle Fourche, it's going to clear up, and it does. It clears up in Montana, and I'm going to make it home tonight still. It's just about sundown, so it's 4:30, 5 o'clock. And just as the sun's setting, all of a sudden it just gets beautiful. Everything opened up, and the sun's just setting out there. The ground blizzard kind of abated. There was no snow there, so the wind was still blowing, but there was no blizzard. And I remember I looked, I was doing 65, 68 miles an hour, and I was like, this was the right choice. I made it. So I'm going, I got the tunes back on, I'm shooting Instagram, shoot out a video like, hey, everybody worrying about me, I made it. Then the sun went down, and it was like just flicked a switch. All of a sudden, the ground blizzard completely engulfs everything. And I'm slowing it down, and I'm going maybe 25 now.
So you've hit Faith and you've headed west. Yeah. Headed west again.
I'm west out of Faith. And from there, it's 70 miles to Belle Fourche, 80 miles, something like that. And first 20, 30 minutes, I'm rocking. I'm making time. I'm like, I'm going to catch up. I'm going to get home. I'll drive straight through the night. I'll get home first thing in the morning. Make some lemonade out of a lemony situation. Then the sun went down. Now, the whole day I'd been driving in a whiteout ground blizzard, but I could at least, 25, 35, 40 miles an hour. I could see what was going on. This was different. Sun goes down, and now you're at the mercy of your headlights. You have no light from the sun, none of that going on. And it got really hard to see. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, my whole truck was just completely engulfed to where I couldn't even see. I could barely see the bumper on the front of my truck out my window. That's about 4 or 5 feet out of my front windshield. And I'm like, it's like it just went dark. Like this ground blizzard got so intense it engulfed my headlights, and it just got dark. I turned my flashers on, and I could see more from the yellow lights of my flashers. When they would flash, I could kind of see like, I'm moving. And when you get in a whiteout from passing a truck, like there's this moment where you're like, I can't see, but then it goes away and you're like, oh, got it. You get just past that moment where you get in like this really sick zone where you're like, I can't see. Okay, I can't see, and I don't know what's in front of me. And it's when you just go past that regular moment of whiteout. And I hit that, and it just never went away. Like, it never quit. There was no end of it. It wasn't like, oh, if I can just get past this truck, the roads will clear up and I'll see again. It was just that. And so now I slow down, and I don't even know if I'm moving. I'm having a hard time telling if I'm even moving. So I look down, I'm going 5 miles an hour. And I'm like, usually you can see the white line or something. Can't see anything. So I roll my window down, and I stick my head out, and I look straight down off my step, and I can just see when my flashers would flash, it would illuminate the yellow line just for a second. So it's like I can see, now I can't. I can see, but at least there's like this rhythm, and you get in and you're like, okay. And thankfully the wind was blowing, hitting my passenger side, so I could open my window and I wasn't just getting a full 40 mile an hour wind right in my face. And this is where I started to get scared, because I'm like, if I can't stop, everything was just like, stop. And everything tells you, stop, just stop, stop. And you're like, I can't stop. If I stop, what's going to happen behind me? Someone's going to come rolling in and rear end me. That's what causes, we talked about it, that's what causes these pileups. And so I'm playing this game where I'm like, I'm moving, I have to keep moving, and I'm trying to watch for lights behind me in my mirror, just some light to see if I need to try to speed up real quick. But at the same time, watching in front of me, because I'm like, anybody that's out there, I guarantee has stopped, and they're just going to be sitting on the road in front of me. So it's this game between, is there someone in front of me? There's the yellow line. Is there someone behind me? Just boom, 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 back and forth for like 20 miles. And after I got over the initial, sickness of the situation, I started to kind of gather myself and, okay, here's the plan. This is what we're going to do. But this was the scared part. This is why I was scared. If I drove off the road, I'm on Highway 212, tiny little 2-lane out, like there's nothing out there. It's even it's way more remote than Highway 34, which is already remote in that part of the state. If I drive off, and there's a lot of cuts and steep ditches, literally if I just tip over off the side of the road, no one will see me. If I get pinned in my cab, if my engine dies, it's 50 below zero wind chill. You would just lay there and die. Like, what are you going to do? You can't get out and go anywhere. Even if you do, you can crawl out and get bundled up. How long are you going to make it at 50 below zero wind chill? We always talk about like, oh yeah, trucking's scary, but it finally dawned on me that like, if you don't play your cards right, you could die out here tonight. And I've never had that before. I've always been like, oh yeah, I got through. But that's kind of what got me scared. Yeah. So let me just back up real quick, and I'll tell you how this story goes. And I told everybody on Instagram I was going to tell this on the podcast so they could tune in, because they were kind of in the midst of this with me. In fact, I'll try to have Matt insert some footage from Instagram so you can see what I was talking about with this storm. I had called a friend of mine earlier in the day from Western South Dakota to ask him a road report. He's the guy that I haul the concrete toilets for. I do that summer gig. And Troy Vanderboom from Newell, South Dakota. I called Troy and I'm like, hey man, what's it look like? Kind of like everywhere. Okay. Well, he called me just kind of randomly hours later and said, hey, if you can make it to Newell, I really think you need to park your truck here. And of course I'm like, here's my problem. If I shut it off, it's all going to freeze down. I'm not going to get home. He goes, hold on. If you can get to Newell, I can get you into my concrete shop. He has a 80-foot wide by 200-foot long, just massive building that he pours precast concrete in all winter, so it's insulated and heated. He goes, you can put your whole truck, your whole trailer, park it in there, let it thaw out, come out to the house, have some dinner, and,
clean your pants out.
Do some laundry. So immediately, as soon as I get into this spot, I look, and it just so happened that because I went up to Faith, I was in line to drop right into Newell. I was 15 miles from Newell, from a shop that I can park my truck in. So I press on, I do it, and I just claw my way into Newell. He comes down, opens the shop, lets me put my truck in, and spent the night, got up the next morning. Everything was nice and loose, fired up, backed out into the storm, and headed her into Montana. Within 2 hours, I was out of the wind and out of the craziness, and I made it home. But right behind me that day, they shut the whole rest of the state down. They're like, all the roads, It's all done. No more travel, nothing anywhere. So I was one of the last trucks, I think, to make it out of South Dakota into Montana. But it was just stress beyond belief. So I knew that I called you that next morning, was like, we need to get together so we can get on the podcast and talk about this. Let me just share. Can I just share a few things? I know we're getting close on time. I want to share a few things that I've learned from this, because I think everyone can take some stuff from it. Let me tell you the irony of this story was that a year ago, I took a trip from Montana to Minnesota. This week, a year ago, right after Christmas, a year ago, I'm driving across I-94, and my dashboard starts to flicker. And whenever it would flicker, it would shut my engine off. 20 below zero, with a load of cattle on going to Minnesota. Truck would just shut off for a second and then turn right back on. It's like 2 a.m, and I'm like, oh. And then it's fine. And it wasn't like when you hit a bridge, it shuts. It was just this random, just a ghost in my electronics. So I'm so on edge, and I'm so freaked out, and I'm just so stressed because I got cattle, I got me, the wind's blowing. And I get to thinking, and I realize I have a social media friend in Minnesota. So first thing, 6 a.m, I message him. I make it out across. I get my cattle unloaded, and I message this guy, and I'm like, hey, I don't have any confidence that I'm going to make it home. Is there anyone that can look at this? He goes, I've got a heated shop. I rent a heated spot in this shop. He goes, come down. You can put your truck in. Just thaw it out and start looking some stuff over. So I go down to his place. He backs his truck out into the cold, leaves it running all day, lets me have access to his tools. This was Terry Call Me, is his name. And gives me access to his tools, and I do some research, and I find that I had a faulty little motherboard relay. It's a typical problem for Freightliners. So he takes me in his car, drives me like 70 miles away on just horrible ice roads, wrecks everywhere, drives me down, picks this part up, brings me back. We get all set up, hooked up, go on my way, everything's fine. But this really emphasized to me the importance of having connections, like being connected to people and fostering relationships. Like, there is maybe a reason that you should get to know people in the towns that you drive through. That, your social media shouldn't just be mindless garbage. Like, there should be some substance and some meaning behind it. Because last year I had this connection with Terry that, saved my bacon. This year I've got this work connection with Troy, completely saved my bacon. And so as I was thinking back on those, I just thought those are both situations that it takes fostering some relationship with those, regularly checking in, calling these guys, having a friendship with them. And in doing that, it's just two things that could have just gone so much the other way were saved by having a solid connection with someone.
I think that's something that Rooster had in a lot of the towns that he drove through for years, is he had connections in a lot of the towns, which I know that he fell back on at times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It just takes it from like, I got to go from Montana to here, and I'm just in no man's land for 1,000 miles. It just makes it to like, if I can just get to this town, because you're connected, and you're so right with Rooster.
Do you have any, as you say that, I kind of thinking, well, how do you even make those connections? I think one thing is, you've been on the road for a while, pull into these towns and find where the elementary school is and park your truck across the street from it and just get outside there and just kind of stand around.
Just start talking to the kids.
Your parents are out.
You will definitely make connections with either law enforcement or parents. Oh, that's funny, man. Let me talk real quick about whiteouts, driving in whiteouts. Because there's times like that where roads are open, you can go, but it's whiteout.
So the best advice is don't.
First option is just don't go out in it. But if you find yourself out in it, and you gotta be where you're at. If I could put this into a phrase, to drive in a whiteout, you need to go fast enough not to wreck, and you need to go slow enough not to wreck. So what I mean is, you got to go fast enough that someone's not going to rear end you, and you're not going to cause the next pile up. Big, huge pile up out in Ohio this week on the turnpike. And I guarantee it was from something like this where someone was just, they weren't going fast enough. If you can't go fast enough to keep from pile ups happening behind you, you need to you just need to get off the road. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just get off the road. So you need to go fast enough not to wreck, slow enough not to wreck. You got to be slow enough that you can react. You can only go as fast as your reaction time will allow you to go. So that if something does appear out of the whiteness, and I like to drive, this sounds weird, but I drive with my eyes, with sunglasses on and my eyes really wide open. And you can just make out those shadows before they appear, and allows you to move over and get around and keep going. But keep that in mind, you guys, if that makes sense. Another reason to understand mechanics a little bit as an operator, something that'll set you apart from just a placeholder to becoming an operator, is knowing how your truck feels. Know what's normal. Like, what should your truck feel like when you floor it? When you give it all the throttle? What should it sound like? What should it feel like? Because when you get in this cold weather, if you know what it should sound like, you'll know when something starts getting funky. Meaning, if your fuel's starting to gel up a little bit, you'll go, when I give it the full throttle, that's not right. Something's going on. And you can get to a safe place before you just freeze up and get stranded somewhere out there in the middle of nowhere. So really important to know your stuff, not just crank the tunes and roll on, because in these situations you got to really be able to feel it.
Hey, back to the whiteouts.
Yeah.
This is something you were doing that I have found is not intuitive to some people. And that's when you can't see, you're used to looking ahead and seeing what's ahead of you. When that happens with whiteouts, ground blizzards, is you have to look for the lines. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times those lines are out, you're looking down out of your window right. to the extreme, to out the front of your car, looking for the lines just past your hood. Mm-hmm. A couple of years ago, we had a bad ground blizzard here. And I was driving home from work, and the car in front of me, you couldn't see hardly at all. I'm going to say about a car length was about all you could see. I could just see the taillights of the car ahead of me. And I was watching the white line just to the right front of my car. But I saw this car drift all the way across into the oncoming lane of traffic and go off the road.
Oh, they went off
on the opposite side of the road. And within about a second, I'm not exaggerating, a second of going off of the road, a semi oncoming came right out of the right out of the whiteness, right out of the white. Like, jeez. It gave me such a shot of adrenaline that it made me feel sick to watch, because I was watching that car just drift forward and back, and I could tell the driver was not looking at the lines. Yeah. And that's where then I got stopped and was able to help that driver get back on the road and say, here, just follow me, because you can see my taillights, just follow me. But talking to that driver, oh man, they had never even heard or thought of the concept of looking down to look for the lines, because you can't see what's in front of you, so you got to look for something. And that's all I was able to see. But it was so close. Did
you imagine that right in front of you?
Because I watched, that car, and then it went off, and then whoosh, that semi just came out of it. Oh.
And the thing is none of them probably knew. The semi probably had no idea, because it was so white out. It was like, he probably didn't know that
the driver of the car didn't know a semi had gone by. The car had no idea. Didn't know a semi even went by.
Yeah.
I said,
that's when you know it's white out, man. When nobody even has a clue. They're like, what? I just about ran a car over?
So when you're talking about driving in whiteouts, I think it seems intuitive to look for the lines.
Yeah, but
that's all you can see. But I realize it's not. So
keep that in mind. There's another. I'm glad you brought that up, because that brings to mind another whiteout. Not a ground blizzard whiteout, but a passing a semi. If you're driving on a 2-lane and a semi passes you, they blow up so much dust that it creates a temporary whiteout, or a snowplow can do the same thing. So my advice there is, when you see a semi coming, know that you're going to get whited out, and you don't know what's behind the semi. There could be a long line of traffic, which means you have to stay in your lane, or there could be nothing. So I like to get slowed down to a speed that I'm comfortable, that I'm confident I'm moving, and I can handle having no visibility for just a short bit. And look, like you said, look at the lines, see where the lines are at, see where your hands are at, and then just relax. And as you go by, just know that this is the lines, this is the road ahead. Know the road's straight here. These are the lines. Go through the whiteout, and then everything reappears, and you'll always find that you're just where you're supposed to be if you'll just take a second to go. Don't be on your phone or listen to the radio and going, oh crap, wow, here's a whiteout, because that's when it catches you off guard. You're like, what? So just see it coming.
It is a bad feeling.
It's the worst.
But the thing about it too is it almost it's disorienting too.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like you closed your eyes and it was darkness.
Dude, check this out.
Just this swirl of,
you don't know what's what. So old Roscoe down in Billings, good friend, he said that he was talking to a UPS buddy the other day, and his UPS buddy goes, things got bad. It was a whiteout, and he actually. He goes, I'm trying to grab gears in this whiteout, and I can't find. First, I can't get in gears. High range, low range. I'm reaching for gears, and I can't get nothing. He goes, it finally dawns on me to look down, and he looks at his speedometer, and he's zero. He's not even moving. He thought he was going down the highway, and he's trying to grab gears and grinding. It's that disorienting that you're like, no, I'm moving. You're not. You're parked. So he pushes his clutch in and clicks it into gear.
It is,
but it's that bad.
It's horrible. I mean, the best thing is just don't be out in it. But there's times where you're driving, you think it's no ground blizzard, just fine.
Right.
But the conditions are just right that when a truck comes by you,
mm-hmm.
or even worse, a snowplow, and they're kicking up so much powder up in the air that it's a
Yep.
It's an experience.
Right. Let me do this one last thing, because this was really interesting. This was probably one of the most interesting lessons of the week for me. Fuel temperature. And this is where I'm going to talk about wind chill. I'm going to bring this back in. My truck has fairings along the side, meaning basically plastic body panels that cover the fuel tanks. So you can't see the fuel tanks. They're covered. So when wind comes in, it hits my body panel instead of hitting my fuel tank. So it breaks the wind and then allows that fuel tank to retain more heat, because it's not directly having wind suck heat right off the surface of the fuel tank. So I kept this little infrared heat gun with me, and every time I'd stop and get out, I'd open the tank and gun my fuel, the actual fuel in the tank. It's about 47 degrees inside my tank when it was that cold out. Then I would shoot the actual tank. Tank itself was like 25 degrees. So you can see how the heat, that 25 degree tank is obviously going to draw heat away. But the reason your fuel tanks stay warm is because your engine, it sucks fuel from the tanks, goes into the engine. It only burns about half of it, and the rest it kicks back into the tank. So it has a hot fuel return, and that hot fuel dumping in while you're driving keeps the tanks warm. So I was like, if I can make it to Belfouche, I'm going to top off my tanks at Belfouche with some really good fuel. I'm going to treat my fuel, and I'm going to roll on. So by the time that next morning that I got into Belfouche, first of all, I noticed there was a truck that was gelled up in the fuel island. He was stuck there. I'd shut down, and it's so cold, he wasn't going to get out. But I usually don't worry about fuel pouring into my tank because the tanks are underground, which, like your water tanks, stayed thawed out because
mm-hmm.
they use heat from the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you have fuel tanks that are buried underground, you don't worry about the fuel. Check this out, though. It was so cold with the wind blowing and everything that the ground wasn't able to keep much heat. I took my heat gun and shot the fuel coming out of the ground into my tank. Their fuel's treated for about 15 below zero. I shoot it, 7 below zero. The diesel was 7 degrees below zero coming out of the ground into my tank. That's so much colder than I expected it to be. I thought it would be, 15, 20 degrees. It wasn't. So know this, that if you're in a really extreme cold situation, don't let your tanks get down low, because you're going to be putting cold fuel from the ground into your tanks. Whereas if you fill them when they're already half full, that's 40 to 50 degree diesel in your tanks. You're going to add 0 degrees, 7 below 0 degree fuel to it. It's going to keep that diesel warmer. And And the science behind this is that Roscoe, same friend, he was out in some of this, and he was trying to get to a cheap fuel station. So he rolled in out in Missoula, and he goes, I couldn't have much left in my tanks at all. And he goes, my truck never gels up. I'm always good. And he goes, he starts filling it. And he goes, as I'm sitting there watching, my stacks are clean. He goes, I high idle it up, 1,500 RPMs. My engine's really running while I'm fueling, and clean, clear smoke. And then he goes, all of a sudden, as I start fueling, smoke starts turning blue coming out of his stacks. Because the diesel was so cold going in, it was already starting to give his fuel system problems. So he goes, couple what happened to me with what you found with your heat gun, even if it costs you expensive fuel, he goes, you got to fill up at a half tank, because I almost gelled up from all this cold fuel. He didn't, thankfully. He went and got a bunch of treatment real fast and shoved in there and got it. But don't assume that because diesel's coming out of the ground, it's okay to put in your tanks, because it was a lot colder than I realized. But I've never been more thankful to get home, thankful for good friends, good connections, lessons learned. Would I do it differently next time? I can't really say that I would. I mean, the alternative, it's hard to say. I can't say that it was right or wrong. It's just what I did. So I guess I'll leave it at that. But some major lessons learned, and hopefully some of you, I know a lot of you are going through it this week too, but that was
it would.
rough.
This would be something to probably sit down and talk through from the beginning. Should you have done this? Should you have done this?
And you're like, well, you shouldn't have taken the load to start with. Well, is the last load of the year. Like, there's going to be no more sales for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Those cattle just be sitting there. I guess maybe said I'll do it after Christmas. I'm going to miss this weather window, and I'm not comfortable being out in it. You know, I could have done that probably. And now, of course, looking back at all the stress and craziness of it.
If you saw forecasts for a storm like this coming in the future, would you push your load back and say,
yes, I would. Yep.
Say, figure it out?
I would have said, we missed, we screwed this up. I'll just feed it till after Christmas, and I'll load it up the day after. I'll find a truck. We'll get her done, but we're going to have to feed them for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. How about coming home, leaving the freeway?
Getting off of the safety corridor.
Yeah.
I carry a lot of cold weather gear in my truck for this reason. Had I just had my truck die, I'm confident that I have a lot of gear. I could have bundled up and survived until somebody ran into me. But that's not most trucks in the cold on the roads. So no, I would recommend probably stay the course, and unless you're well prepared for being shut down. Yeah.
I gotta read something. There's a guy I follow on social media. I've actually taken a course from him. His name's Mike Glover. Former Army Special Forces guy. He got out of the military, and he started he calls it Fieldcraft Survival. I'm trying to find this post, what he wrote. But his company is really designed trying to have people prepared for whatever circumstances they find themselves in. And he just posted today. I'm pulling it up here so I can read it. Big storms in New York this past week. And he posted a headline. It said, brutal weather has killed at least 34 people across the country. And then the headline goes on and said, dead bodies found in snowbanks and cars after this huge storm blast New York. People dying in snowbanks in their cars. He goes, look, this storm was predicted weeks in advance. Yet we still have people die waiting on emergency services to rescue them. Thousands spent Christmas in airports after it was reported that flights would be shut down. Hundreds stranded on highways caught in storms path that was predicted. And he said, we need to be more self-sufficient, even if that means preparing for the worst times. I think this storm, everyone who got stuck in their cars knew the storm was coming.
Right.
Yet they were ill-prepared enough to not be able to sit in their car in cold weather until someone comes and digs them out.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, we could probably talk for a long time about mistakes you made, what you do different, would you do anything different?
Right.
But it all comes down to that if you are going to be out in this kind of weather, you've got to have preparations in place in your vehicle to maintain core temperature for a period of time. This might be a time to bring this up, kind of segue into this. We are moving the podcast YouTube episodes off of your YouTube channel,
Right.
and starting a Steady at the Wheel podcast channel. That was what our plan was all along.
Correct.
In fact, we never even thought we'd ever put any podcasts on your channel, but so busy and so much going on that it was just easier to.
And again, to get it out, just like, hey, check this out.
You had infrastructure, so to speak, in place. Yeah. Ended up going on there, but we had talked about from the beginning, if we were going to be doing a YouTube channel for this podcast, that it may be of interest or beneficial to not just have the podcast videoed and put on there, but to start doing other videos, instructional, educational, of interest type stuff. For instance, a video that's just going through what you carry for emergency prep if your truck shuts down and way below, walking through what you have. Just instructional videos, what you do to prepare your truck for cold weather, what supplements, diesel supplements you're using. Probably it may even be a neat thing to do is to get out on bad roads and stop if it's safe.
Yeah.
And, video the roads.
Right.
At ground level, video the roads when you're in the truck, things to look for and what you're seeing, and then if I'm seeing this is what I'm looking for, how I'm changing my driving patterns. If I'm seeing this, I'm not worried.
Right.
But, that was a dangerous week for a lot of people, including yourself.
It was. Yeah.
So glad you made it, man. That's craziness. Oh, one last thing. When you put diesel treatment in with cold weather anti-gel stuff, do you put it in before you fuel or after?
I put it in before, just to make sure it gets blended in there good right off the bat. Yeah.
And the supplements that you use, Hot Shot Secret, and then I use Hot Shot Secret. I was on their website recently, and they say to put it in before.
Do they?
That's actually on their instructions. Yeah.
Okay.
Which makes me wonder with, if you have really cold diesel, if that cold diesel is that you're fueling up with is dumping into a puddle of anti-gel. If you don't do that, maybe that's the difference between gelling right there.
Right there in the pump, like that guy was.
Anyway,
poor dude. I've got one last tip, but I'm going to save it for the next episode. It has to do with that clip of the guys all being drifted in. I'm going to tell you. I'll just give you this teaser. I'm going to teach you how not to get drifted into a truck stop, so that you don't become the next viral video on Instagram.
All right. Our Instagram page is Steady at the Wheel Podcast. You can email us steadyatthewheelpodcast@gmail.com. Yeah. Jackson's Instagram and YouTube.
Instagram would be at Shumanush, where you can watch my winter struggles. And then YouTube, of course, is Wild Wild West.
And then within days,
by the time this is out, it should be.
We should have the Steady at the Wheel Podcast YouTube channel.
Yep.
So if you are, even if you don't watch it on YouTube, if you have a YouTube account, and go on there and subscribe to it, that really helps us out.
Yeah. And there's gonna be fun stuff coming, more so than just the podcast. So
yeah, we've got some things. Hey, I have one last thing. We got an email, a question that I wanted to run by you before we go. I made me think about that when I gave that email address. So this listener, question for Jax. I don't know how to feel it. It doesn't say a question for you guys. It says a question for Jax.
Oh man, I don't even know what it is. This is.
Can you explain the single axle setup on your cattle trailer? I've been driving truck in Canada for 13 years now, and I've never seen such a thing.
Yeah, so you don't see those in Canada because they probably don't recognize that configuration.
Explain what it is first.
So single, dual, single is you have a 3-axle trailer, and the first axle, instead of having duals on it, it just has a single tire on each end. So you have a single tire, and then the center axle has duals on it. So there would be 4 tires across that axle, and then the back axle is the same as the first axle. It just has single wheels on it. And it's always a spring ride trailer. And the point of it is weight savings and less tires on the ground. That's what it boils down to. There's nothing more or less than that. It's like it's spring ride, so that's several hundred pounds lighter than an air ride suspension, and then removing 4 wheels and tires from your rig also gives you another almost 1,000 pounds of weight savings, which means you can haul a greater payload that pays you more. But that's it. The downside of them is if you say you get a flat tire on one of those singles, of course you can't really limp to town. You're kind of stuck where you're at, so you need to have tire repair kit with you, or a way to fix your tire on the road so you're not stranded. The upside of them is the weight savings and rolling resistance. They pull just like a feather because you got way less tires on the ground.
Do you ever see them on things besides cattle trailer?
A few flatbeds, very few, but very rare, because most flatbeds are not triple axles. They're usually just 2 axles.
Almost a rule. It's cattle trucks.
Yeah, I would say 95% of that configuration is for cattle trailers. Yep.
All right, well, right on. We'll, I think probably the next couple episodes you're going to hear from us are going to be a little breakdown of the Billy Jack and Rooster episode.
Yeah, cool.
And then I think after that we're going to be digging in with Weston.
Yep, that's going to be good too.
Weston, our youngest brother, will be in town, who Jackson and Weston have some trucking stories.
We got them.
So, you guys, we appreciate the support, appreciate the listens. We have some exciting things we think coming up that are going to hopefully allow us to have a little more time to work on this podcast. Mm-hmm. Maybe at least get to where we cannot have the lights go out during the middle of it. Anyway, guys, take care out there, everyone. Be safe. Drive well.